Hello, and welcome to this episode of Lift Every Voice. Lift Every Voice is a program of the Louisville Branch NAACP in which we seek to keep our community informed of issues that impact individuals in our community. It is a program in which we bring to you current information about what issues are impacting our community. It is a program to educate you as to what is happening and what is taking place to make certain that as an informed individual, you can make decisions that impact your lives and the lives of others in the community. The NAACP has been fighting for 113 years, fighting for civil rights, human rights, economic rights, and educational rights. So we are a multifaceted organization addressing a number of areas and always seeking to impact and improve the lives of African Americans in this country. And we continue to do that. The NAACP Louisville Branch is a all volunteer organization. We have no paid staff or individuals. So all of the work that gets done in the Louisville Branch is done by volunteers. And the chief volunteer of the work that we do here in Louisville is the president of the Louisville Branch, Raoul Cunningham. Welcome, Raoul.
Thanks a lot for having me, Ray.
Yeah. So when you hear the name Raoul Cunningham in Louisville, and those of you who are listening know that Raoul has a long and distinguished career in terms of fighting for civil rights, starting out as a high school student, really before high school, middle school student, and to this day continues to fight to do the things that he needs to do. And not only is he the president of the Louisville Branch NAACP, but he's also a national board member. So in his national board member role, he helps to set policy and direction for the organization and is involved in all of that. One of the things that we're going to talk about today, which is one of the most important things, is voting rights. And in a sort of short summary, Raoul, what would you say is the status of voting rights in America today?
Declining. Today, so many states are pushing legislation that we call voter suppression. This year alone, more than 27 states have started legislation to suppress, deny the vote. Voting is the cornerstone of democracy, and yet they are trying to deny voting rights for all citizens. And in my opinion, that's what the status is.
Well, you mentioned that there several states are currently have introduced bills, and last year it was something like 37 states adopted or had introduced over 400 bills that would in our vernacular suppress the vote, not designed to enhance voting, but to in fact suppress the vote. So we talk about what is taking place on a national level. Let's talk about the two big bills that came out of the House, but has not been able to get a vote in the Senate. In fact, in order to allow a debate, the vote in the Senate turned it down. So that is the John R. Lewis Voting Rights or Voting Restoration Act, and then the Freedom to Vote Act. So talk about those two.
The John Lewis Restoration, back in, I think it was, 2017 or 2013, when the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And they stated that Section 4B, which outlined and gave the Justice Department the right to file suits and preclearance, which meant that states that had discriminatory practices had to get clearance from the Justice Department before they could enact some of this legislation. The John Lewis Voting Rights or Voting Restoration Act would restore the legislation And Supreme Court said Congress could correct or could change and make the Voting Rights Act back to where it used to be for pre-clearance. That's what the John Lewis Act would do.
Okay. Freedom to Vote Act.
Freedom of Vote Act would allow and turn back some of the suppressive legislation that has been enacted by these various legislators.
You know, the senior senator from Kentucky speaks often about that legislation wants to overturn what states can do. From my reading of the Freedom to Vote Act, it sets national standards so that every state has the same standard. What's so wrong with every state having the same standard?
I can't figure it out because this Congress has the right to pass legislation. In Kentucky, just about every state now has the right to vote at the age of 18. It's a standard.
Right.
What McConnell wants to do is to allow the states to continue to pass different legislation, such as in Georgia, which now has suppressed the vote. Or look at Alabama, when they have redistricted their congressional seats. And in Alabama, African Americans compose about 30% of the population. And yet, I think they have 7 seats, and they have narrowed it down to 1 seat where African Americans have a majority and can elect a representative of their own.
So so we talked about the national. Let's talk about Kentucky and what's going on in Kentucky right now in terms of that. We have a new Secretary of State. He really isn't new. He's been there now, in his
2 years.
2 years. But a lot of things have turned in terms of Kentucky. What has been Kentucky's response in terms of voting rights, and what's going on here?
You know, Kentucky was not one of the states that was included in the 1965 Voting Rights Act because Kentucky did not have any past history of discrimination. When you now look at Kentucky's voting rights or voting history, you have felons who were not allowed to vote until the Governor Burse's executive order, which restored the right to vote. Now, that was historic and very good. However, when Governor Burse leaves office, the next governor can eliminate that provision or that executive order, and you would no longer have it. So Kentucky needs a constitutional amendment to give former felons the right to vote. Kentucky now does have some early voting, but it was reduced to what had been put into effect for the 2020 election.
Right, whereas we had almost 3 weeks of early voting before. Now I think the legislation provides for 3 days.
For 3 days, yes.
So in terms of voters, and you talk about the ex-offenders, Governor Burse restored those voting rights. In reading what happened after the would have been the last election, that even though in the 2020 election, only 1 in 4 of the individuals who had their rights restored actually voted.
Yeah.
So what, in terms of where we are, what's you think what's the NAACP role in reaching out to these ex-offenders and others?
We've got to be able to find them. Some go back, have been off or out of the institution for say 20 years. We have got to be able to reach out, find them, and make sure they know that they are eligible to register to vote. And that's a difficult process. In the past, we have tried radio announcements. We have tried Facebook. We have tried the digital means of trying to communicate. But as you said, 1 in 4. So it's a large percentage that we are still missing.
So, for those who are listening to watching this program today, for any of you that knows of any individual who is an ex-offender and has a question about whether or not he or she can in fact vote, what they need to do is to go to the website civilrightsrestoration.ky.gov. That's civilrightsrestoration.ky.gov, and enter their name, birthday, and the information requested. You can determine whether or not you are now qualified to in fact vote. And if you're not qualified, it will tell you what you need to do to seek a restoration of your voting rights from the governor. So that is something we need to do. As we talk about this particular group, there has been an ongoing purging process of voter rolls in Kentucky.
Yeah.
So you can talk to us about that and what's taking place and what should be our response.
Our response, well, what is happening, they're not calling it purging. They are calling cleaning up the rolls. And when you hear the term clean up the voter rolls, that means the people who have not voted in a number of years are being removed from the voter rolls. And they would have to re-register in order to be put back on. Now, what's our response? We get the list, and again we try to contact them, or those individuals who have been removed. But again, that is not an easy process. We have limited resources, and as you said, we're all volunteers. But we get the list, and we try to look up or find a current address or current phone number so we can make contact with them.
Because with this cleaning up process that's taking place, not all individuals get the notice from the Secretary of State's office.
No.
So as it relates to all voters, do you have any suggestions or recommendations of what all voters should be doing at this particular point in time?
All voters need to double check with their county clerk to see, or their Board of Elections, to see if they are currently registered. Now, there is a website that they can go to. Put in their name, date of birth, and it tells them if they are currently, or where they are currently registered, if they're currently registered.
And that website is govoteky.org. Govoteky.org. So everybody, a registered voter, should be able to use that website to check to see whether anything has happened to your registration, to make certain that you're in a position to vote. We have a primary coming up in May. When is the cutoff for voters to register for the primary?
April 18th. They have until April the 18th to register to vote for the May primary.
So what elected positions are coming up that will be on the May primary ballot?
Oh my God, quite a few.
Yeah.
One, United States Senator. That will be the first one a first slot on the ballot. Second slot would be your congressperson, 3rd Congressional District. You have, although it's no longer an effective office, you will also have your county judge, your county commissioners, the sheriff, the property valuation administrator, your coroner, county officers. Then you have your mayor, city council persons, or metro council persons, your school board, as well as judicial, your judges. This year, Jefferson County judge on the Supreme Court is not seeking re-election. Your 2 Court of Appeal judges from Jefferson County are not seeking re-election. You have the circuit court judges are all up this year. Family court judges are all up this year. And district court judges are all up this year.
So this is going to be a very, very important year in terms of elective offices locally in our community, which means that everybody ought to be out registering to vote.
That's correct. Now, and to me, the NAACP is nonpartisan. However, we need to be concerned that Judge Clayton, who sits on the Court of Appeals, is not seeking re-election. We know that Judge Olu Stevens, who is African American, is not seeking re-election. So, it's important for us in terms of the mayor, city council, and the judges, which all impact our lives. And therefore, we're going to have to make sure that we all go out and vote.
You know, a lot of people, particularly younger people in our community, said, my vote doesn't mean anything. It doesn't count anything. How do you address that in regards to in making certain they understand elections have consequences?
Elections have consequences. We talked earlier about the Senate not enacting the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. That's because we did not elect enough senators who would be in favor of such an act. We have got to make it real and to our younger voters, or potential voters. The Breonna Taylor case. We need people in the judicial system to make sure that the laws are applied equally and equitably. And yes, there'll be about 30 some judges on the ballot. We've got to flip that ballot, vote on both sides of the ballot to make sure we get them all. I don't know what the solution is, but we will try and convince and try to get everyone registered and voting.
You know, saying that elections have consequences, let's talk about redistricting. As a result of the 2020 census, congressional, senatorial, I guess really most of the elected districts across the state have to be redrawn in some fashion. And let's talk about the Kentucky House of Representatives, and particularly in regards to West Louisville. How has redistricting impacted West Louisville?
I think it's impacted West Louisville greatly. In the past, let's take last year, we had 2 majority-minority districts and 2 influence districts. We were able to elect 3 African Americans to the State House of Representatives. This year, with redistricting, we now have, if the courts uphold, 4 majority-minority districts. Now, there are some people who disagree with the position that we took. Redistricting is a process that every 10 years a census is taken, and according to the court's one man, one vote, you redistrict, and according to the numbers in the area. The 41st legislative district has been in African American hands for some time. But when with the census, it showed that the African American population has shifted from the 41st and had shifted not only from the northern part of the West End, but also the southern part, which included Shively and a little bit beyond. Therefore, when the districts were drawn, you lost the 41st as a majority-minority district, and you picked up the 40th and the 44th. So that means that now the district numbers are the 42nd, 43rd, I'm sorry, the 40th, 42nd, 43rd, and 44th.
Right.
So you have shifted from east of Smoketown, or that area, to the southern portion, which includes Shively. That's the greatest impact. I think the other impact of the redistricting process is that the 3rd Congressional District will remain pretty much intact in the city of Louisville. Now, they did take the eastern part of the 3rd that was in other counties and shifted that to the southern part. So that's not a major change for Jefferson County. I think the congressional district, the way they drew the 1st congressional district is by far ridiculous. And I'm hoping that the Circuit Court in Franklin County will rule to redraw that district, because it's ridiculous to try to take from Paducah all the way to Frankfort and include that in one district.
You know, as we sit here and talk about that, the judge has ruled that he's not going to issue any type of injunctive relief to block the implementation of the redistrict maps, but at the same time, he has also not dismissed the lawsuit that was brought.
That's correct.
So he's created, and then from the bench, he actually said when you were talking about the 1st Congressional District stretching all the way from Paducah or Ballard County all the way to Frankfort, it was a little bit on the ridiculous side, and he had some concerns about it. But again, it all goes to say that if we're going to make a real difference, then we have to make certain that our votes get cast, our votes get counted. And we in some elections, and when we go back to to 2008, we had great turnout among African Americans because Obama was on the ticket.
Yes.
We had good turnout in 2012 because Obama was on the ticket.
Mhm.
How do we get our people to consistently vote election after election?
Mr. Burse, if I had the answer for that, I wouldn't be talking to you.
Okay.
I would be on NBC, CBS, and ABC. We have got to work at it. And we've got to convince people that their right of the vote is what makes progress. The vote, it was the vote
Right.
that freed us from slavery.
Right. If the vote wasn't important, we talked at the beginning of this episode about these voter suppression laws.
Mm-hmm.
If the vote wasn't important, nobody would be enacting these suppression laws.
No.
And so something that obvious and in front of our face, you would think that we need to respond and we need to do something. We have got to improve the turnout among African Americans and at all age levels to make certain that we have some impact. And when we vote, we can change things.
We can.
Yeah.
When we vote, we win.
Okay. Well, my guest today has been Raoul Cunningham, president of the Louisville Branch NAACP and also NAACP national board member. And we've been talking about voting rights. And we're going to be in the season where voting is going to take place, and we need everybody who is registered to vote to in fact turn out to vote. We need individuals who have not registered to do so. You can, in fact, if you want to check your registration, go to govoteky.gov, govoteky.gov, and check your registration, because you need to make certain that your registration is in fact in order, so that when you show up on election day, there is no conflict or any hindrance that you may face as a result of that. The NAACP is very, very active in terms of making certain, or trying to make certain, that voters turn out. But we can do only so much. At the end of the day, it's an individual decision that you need to make. And each of those individual decisions impact our community. So if you don't vote, there is no basis for you to complain about what's taking place. And we know that there are lots of things in Louisville, Jefferson County that need to improve. Lots of things in the Commonwealth of Kentucky that needs to improve. And the one place where we can make a difference is in the vote. And so the NAACP is encouraging you to vote and make certain your registration is in order. Because when we vote, we actually lift our voices to be heard. And when we lift our voices to be heard, we make a major impact in terms of our community. Thank you for watching this program, and whatever you do, check your registration and go vote.
Amen.